Namaskara and welcome to BIC Talks, a podcast brought to you by Bangalore International Centre, where we present conversations that move, inform, and encourage discourse.
And so when I started looking at 1923, three very striking streams of thought came before my eyes. One, led by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Another by Rabindranath Tagore, Gurudev. And third by Mahatma Gandhi. If I were to look back on our entire past and think of the very greatest, the names that come to my mind are Buddha, Kabir, Basveshwar, Tukaram. To that league, if I were to look for individuals who belong to that league, but in recent times, these three names qualify.
This lecture by Professor G.N. Devi tells a story that begins exactly 100 years ago, recounting events that took place in the year 1923. Rabindranath Tagore's visit to Gujarat in October and November of that year, Mahatma Gandhi's days in prison, and Dr. Ambedkar being awarded the DSc and being admitted to bar in London. The lecture, which was presented as the annual Vijay Nambishan Memorial Lecture 2023, focuses on the thoughts of the three on the question of nationalism during India's independence movement and compares those three visions with the contemporary views on the same. And now, over to Professor Devi.
Literature is my first love. And in normal times, speaking in the year 2023, I would have chosen to speak on T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland because it completes a century. The Wasteland use one of the Indian myths, actually from the Brihad Aranyak. A section in that poem is called What the Thunder Said. The story is, after having created the universe, Prajapati dances with joy. And while dancing, he speaks, he keeps only shouting, the. Then he calls all these creations, the Devas, Danavas, Manavas, and asks them, did you understand what I said? And each one gives a different answer. One says, yes, you said Datta, be a giver. Another says, you said Dayadhvam, be compassionate, and so on. The third one says Damyata. I would have gone into the body or the skin of some great literary work and spoken to you, speaking on the in memory of Vijay. Because we remember him as a creative writer. But our times are such that instead of speaking about what the thunder said, it is good to look at the structure of the thunder. And so for 2023, while I was thinking of the T.S. Eliot's poem, I thought, why not speak of 1923 slightly differently? And so when I started looking at 1923, three very striking streams of thought came before my eyes. One, led by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Another by Rabindranath Tagore, Gurudev. And third by Mahatma Gandhi. If I were to look back on our entire past and think of the very greatest. The names that come to my mind are Buddha, Kabir, Basveshwar, Tukaram. To that league, if I were to look for individuals who belong to that league, but in recent times, these three names qualify. I mean, they made us, between Gandhi, Tagore, Ambedkar, and of course many others, they made us who we are. And therefore I decided to think of 1923 and what these three minds were doing at that time. In 1923, young Ambedkar, having recently launched his memorable magazine with the help of Shahu Maharaj of Kolhapur, had gone back to England and was writing his thesis, which he wrote under the title The Question of the Indian Rupee. In March, the thesis was submitted, he got the degree. But by October that year, the thesis was published in the form of a book. It was so immensely popular immediately that it sold out in 2 years' time, all the copies. And when Dr. Ambedkar, when in 1948, Dr. Ambedkar had to bring out the second version of that book, he relooked at that book and wrote the following. I'm going to read out from the preface to the second edition of The Question of the Rupee. The problem of the rupee, not the question of the rupee, the problem of the rupee. So Ambedkar writes, Problem of the Rupee was first published in 1923. Ever since its publication, it has had a great demand, so great that within a year or two the book went out of print. The demand for the book has continued, but unfortunately I could not bring out a second edition of the book for the reason that my change over from economics to law and politics left me no time to undertake such a task. I have therefore devised another plan. It is to bring out an up-to-date edition of the history of Indian currency and banking in 2 volumes, of which the problem of the rupee forms volume 1. The second volume, by the way, never got written. Volume 2 will contain the history of Indian currency and banking from 1923 onwards. What is therefore issued to the public now is a mere reprint of the problem of the rupee under a different name. Ambedkar says that since 1923, not many scholars had attended to the question of the Indian rupee the same way, and therefore there was no point in revising the book, and so he issued it ditto, the way it was. Now, what did this book contain? It was, of course, a dissertation, and Ambedkar's job was to look at the disparity in the rupee coins. It's rather simple. So, perhaps many of you know that in 1871, Lord Mayo passed a Criminal Tribes Act, for which he was murdered in less than 3 months' time. In October, 12th October, the act came in. By February, Mayo was murdered by Sher Ali Afradi, who was affected by that act. I mean, the act was to brand many communities, 191 communities, as born criminal, not criminal by deed, but by birth. Now, in 71, the British government had recently taken over India from the East India Company after 1857. And soon after that, the British decided to acquire the function, the authority of minting coins. I mentioned the 1871 Act, because the first community listed in the list of included in the list of criminal tribes was Meena, but not as Meena. They were called counterfeiters. The Meenas were the traditional coin makers for different princes, and they knew the equivalence between. They knew the equation between the weight of a coin and the value of a coin. These were used by different princes. The coins used in Mysore were not the coins used in Banaras. The weight of the coins was different. After the company rule ended and the British came to power, the British government took over. They had somehow to bring uniformity among all these coins. They had already taken over the function of coin making, calling the Meenas counterfeiters and their criminals. Now there was a problem. Some of the coins weighed, for example, about 5 grams. Other coins with the same value weighed 5.1 grams or 4.9 grams. Now these coins were made of silver or gold. And so the British wanted to bring a uniformity in the weight and the value of the coins. So from 1860 onward and through the decade of the 1870s and the 1880s, they appointed 5 different commissions. And each commission made suggestions. But each of those commissions, in Europe too there was this problem. It was not only in India, because some European states use silver, others use gold standard. So silver standard or gold standard, parity of weight and value was a big international issue. And the British appointed a series of commissions. Those commissions came up with recommendations, invariably linking the new form of the coin either to the silver standard or to the gold standard. Ambedkar went through all these reports. In fact, he went through all the reports till 1919, from 1861 to 1919, almost several decades, and came to the conclusion that the problem is not the parity if silver or gold standards are kept alive, but the problem is the coin itself. The concluding part of the thesis is, Ambedkar writes,